race is about to get underway though, because the lights go out. It's a good start from Craig Land, who manages to draw up alongside and ahead of Todd Boucher, but they're still level. But on the outside line, Craig Land has the momentum to begin this 15-minute race to the fourth round of the championship as the leader. And for Boucher, he's losing out on second place because Tom Parker moves ahead of yesterday's race winner. And he's all that already. Rain spots on our camera lens is up there at the banking, Johnny.
Yeah, so we know already that the banking could be a little treacherous on this first lap, particularly on cold tyres as well. Those extra centimetres didn't pay off for Todd Boucher then, did they, from the start? Because Craig Land got the traction away far more readily, but Boucher is on the fight back already. So Tom Parker sneaked into second position at the banking in the all-red number 79, but is now under immediate pressure to have that place back again from Todd Boucher.
Yeah, so Boucher wasn't able to go through, I don't think. Then you've got David Hitchin there in fourth, ahead of Glenn Boyer and Ian Hardy, who's hoping to have a better race yesterday. There you can see in the background, you can't see the mountains at the moment, so it's raining on parts of the circuit. But last year's champion then, Craig Land, leads the way. He's yet to win a race this season. He has had that second place yesterday. They had a second at Donington and a sixth at Donington, but can he win a race today? That's his aim. After winning 13 rounds of the championship just last season, and he's got this good advantage, and he's got that buffer now of Tom Parker between himself and the driver he battled with yesterday, Todd Boucher. You can see, if you weren't following the action yesterday, this is the part of the circuit we don't tend to use on 750 Motor Club meetings at Anglesey on the international circuit. So down the Tom Price straight, down towards the hairpin and back again. And it does mean the last corner of the lap, Johnny, very different to the coastal circuit. Yeah,
it's much slower and a harder stop, of course. I think over a 90-degree bend. Yes, it is. More like 100 or 110-degree left-hander. But that wide shot of the extension down the Tom Price Straight gives you an idea of the difference in height between Tom Price Straight, much higher than the return Nameless Straight, and into Bus Stop, the final corner. So a lot of gradient change even in that small section of the Anglesey International Circuit. Nice dice here between Ian Hardy, who was caught up in a moment yesterday, not necessarily of his own making, but he got tangled up with somebody else over at Rocket, so hoping for a better result today. This is Tom Parker under pressure for second place from Todd Boucher, who had a really good previous lap, Josh, and he's now fully alongside.
And is ahead, I think, as they head out of school and up towards Rocket. The battle's behind continually. You've got Tortella and Ian Hardy going wheel to wheel with Paul Clark just behind. Paul Clark, who made his debut in the Clio Series a couple of weeks ago, back in his Locost this weekend, and he makes his move there on one of the many TSR run cars there of David Martin. So David Martin drops a spot for now. You've got Sean Brame behind him. Jack Linus, who had his best race, only his third ever race yesterday, and he finished fifth after not managing a top 10 at Donington. So great to see the driver from Essex, who's come out of the British University Karting Series, moving into low cost and having a big improvement on his second meeting.
Glyn Griffiths in the lone orange car with the white rollover hoop. That car was very sideways at times as the tyres, I think it was described by one driver, turned to jelly partway into the race with about 5 minutes to go, and all the low-cost drivers will need to be mindful of that and their tyre makeup effectively, especially if you push it hard. But that was on a hot day. Maybe it's going to be less of an issue now that the temperatures are certainly a lot cooler than they were here on Saturday. Two cars nose to tail still for second place. They are Tom Parker and Todd Boucher, but Boucher now ahead, having made that move through school, and really sideways for Ian Hardy. He's going to lose at least one, maybe two or three places now, because slotting through is the Paul Clark car, bringing with Paul Clark David Martin sneak through as well.
So that group of cars, about 7 of them I think in that battle, make their way up towards the far right-hander at Church Corner. And there's Paul Clark then in 82, the 38-year-old lorry driver from Southampton, but he's losing out to Tortella, who accelerates through, the 19-year-old student from Oxford. But now he's gaining another place. He's got past Boyer as well, who braked a bit earlier than the rest around him, so he's lost the place actually to David Martin and to Paul Clark. So they all make their way through there. Yeah, so Tortella's a bit further back, isn't he, in the similar liveried car. He's in 11th spot, but they make their way through, and there is 90 Yeah, that's Tuller. So they've swapped cars, I think, from the last time I saw them race.
Okay.
So that's what tricked me. They've both got different liveries on their cars for this season. They make their way then up the Tom Price straight again, and David Martin, who's gained those positions, Johnny, is trying to pull clear of this pack.
Yeah, Hardy round the outside and on the brakes can just about pick off Glenn Boyer, but Boyer's not going to take that line down and will have a better exit, quite possibly from Hairpin. 2 U-bends on this circuit. One's actually called Hairpin, the other one the banking, which is significantly positively cambered for the drivers. Really throws you into the corner at turn 2, and then you can get a good slingshot out of there. But Boyer was not able to stay ahead of Ian Hardy, and Hardy, having lost those places after a big moment exiting the first corner at turn 1, that's much more neat and tidy this time around, and stays in front of Boyer for 5th position.
The lead gap remains out over 2 seconds, so today Todd Boucher is not able to close in on the race leader, Craig Land, so we'll continue to enjoy these battles further down the top 10, including Sean Brame there in car number 8, the retired IT manager from Suffolk, who's been racing in Locost for 15 seasons or so now. A very experienced driver. He's up alongside Glenn Boyer there in 33, and Brame's going, and there's big contact. Boyer rides over the side there of Hardy's car, but Hardy seems to have got away with it, and Glenn Boyer's only lost a few positions as well, so that could have gone a lot worse than it did. So you had a couple of drivers in that side-by-side moment who were involved in the incident yesterday, but I think they both were sort of innocent on that occasion. It was Glenn Boyer who just braked a little bit late. There you can see the slight damage to Ian Hardy's car, but it could have been a lot worse, Johnny.
Hardy by name, Hardy by nature, it would seem, because he did sort of take that in his stride and lost a little bit of bodywork, although it's not fully disconnected, as you say, hanging on just about. He's lost a front left mudguard, but frankly, as we said yesterday, if you return to the pit lane with both intact, you haven't been pushing hard enough. It's going to be side by side into the hairpin as well, and that is a move for Sean Brame losing a spot to Jack Linus, who's again making some progress. So Linus charging hard early on in his low-cost career, but that does not seem to matter because he's mixing with some veterans of the category now.
So they come through to complete 4 laps. Interestingly, in these cooler conditions, the lap times are basically identical to yesterday, 0.03 of a second quicker than yesterday's fastest lap for Craig Land. So certainly on best lap pace, it doesn't seem to make huge amounts of difference. So there's Brame then, who is now up in 7th position, ahead of Linus, and then Ian Hardy, Todd Tuller, Glyn Griffiths, all involved in this battle, and now it's side by side between Hardy and Tuller. Tuller on the inside is unable to make that move, and that just might mean he is vulnerable to Glyn Griffiths behind as they head uphill. They're side by side in front as well, and that is between Brame and Linus is slipstreaming his way up into 7th place, but Brame's a little bit later on the brakes, but he can't make that as they go into the corner. So the rookie driver Jack Linus is now up to 7th.
Car placement from Jack Linus, considering his relative inexperience, very, very good there. He got a good run, as you said, on Sean Brame, but then it was all about where he was putting the car into Rocket, right in the middle of the road. Brame forced to go to the outside, and it's very tough to get by at Rocket then. You have to be forceful around the outside to then deliver the car into the second bit of Rocket, which was that right-hander, much tighter right-hander. It's almost a bit like the Brooklands Lovefield sequence at Silverstone, in that if you brave it out on the outside, you then got the ideal line into the next corner. Glyn Griffiths going slowly from 11th position. The bright orange car, no pace whatsoever on Tom Price Straight, and he's already lost, I think, at least 1 position. Yeah, just crawling right in the foreground there, and I sense that Glyn will be heading straight to the pit lane, Josh.
Real shame for Glyn Griffiths, who got a 9th position finish yesterday, which was his best result of the season so far. There's Todd Boucher really pushing on. He's sliding the car there through the banking, but it's not enough to keep up with Craig Land, who's just set another fastest lap of the race, a 1 minute 48.09. So unlike yesterday, Johnny, where all the fastest lap came early on, I think track conditions mean the tyres aren't going off so much today, and that means the lap times come down as the fuel load comes down.
Yeah, which, well, all the drivers will be grateful for that, I think, to know that the Yokohamas are beneath them to push throughout the course of the race. 15 minutes, you wouldn't expect tyre wear to be an issue, but it certainly was yesterday. And when you compare qualifying pace to race pace yesterday afternoon, it was significantly slower. So Todd Boucher, 2.7 seconds adrift of this man, Craig Land, who still hangs on to that fastest lap and has bettered it on at least one occasion. 1:48.0 is a cracking time, and well, the closest to that is actually Todd Boucher's effort, 0.4 of a second slower. Bit of a recorrection of steering into the left-hander at Siemens there for the race leader, but he has so much time in hand, he can afford the very slight errors there. Really more about corrective steering than a big slide. And the gap for Tom Parker, now having scrapped early on with Todd Boucher, is too wide, I would suggest, to close in on the top two, but it's healthy behind, back to David Hitchin and the rest.
For Tom Parker, he's much closer to the top two than he was yesterday. He was 15 seconds behind, where today he's within 5 seconds of the leader, so I'm sure he'll be pleased with that. And within the same second, his best lap as the leaders, where yesterday he was the best part of a couple of seconds slower. So it's a better day for Tom Parker, even if the result for him is going to remain the same. So there's Hitchin across the line in 4th position, the ex-Clio racer. Then the battle for 5th. There's 3 of them involved because David Martin has been caught by Paul Clark and Jack Liner. So this is a good battle here with the TSR car of David Martin at the head of it. The driver who finished 4th in the championship last year. Then Paul Clark behind, who's in his 6th season of the Locost Championship. And he says basically the whole paddock have helped him build this car, but not so good for Glenn Boyer. He was the driver who had the incident up at Rocket a few laps ago, and he has had an off there out of 11th position at turn 1, so that will have cost him some positions. But going back now to the battle involving Paul Clark, he's lost 6th position then to Jack Linus, who continues to make progress, Johnny.
Linus is impressing me, to be honest. You wouldn't think this was his first season in the Low-Cost Championship, and he's now nibbling all over the back of David Martin in the all-gold car. The start of the lap for Glenn Boyer, he had Sean Brame right in front of him, 0.7 of a second, that's all. So I hope that the two of them didn't get tangled up. Brame is still going, and Brame taking the fight to Ian Hardy right now. So Brame in the red-nosed green car to the outside of sky blue liveried Ian Hardy. And Hardy carrying some battle scars, particularly on the rear left, but tucked in nicely at Siemens there to defend through the left-hander. And it's important to do that because Tom Price Straight's a great opportunity to overtake, as perhaps Jack Linus is demonstrating here, shown the outside line, but getting great drive off the corner. But the downside for Linus now is that the next corner is a left-hander at bus stop. So they are side by side. David Martin on the left, Linus on the right, and on the grass is the 77 car of Andy Perkins, currently in 18th position.
Linus didn't quite get himself up ahead of David Martin, so he's still there in 6th place with a couple of laps to go for Jack Linus. He started on the 6th row of the grid. He's up to 6th. Paul Clark's on the grass out of turn 1. He's back on the tarmac again without too much of a problem. But that would have been a bit of an entertaining ride for Paul this morning. But yeah, for Jack Linus, he got up to 5th yesterday. And can he do the same today? Can he get himself up ahead of David Martin, who finished just in front of him yesterday? He was 4th. Behind them at this stage still, though, is Paul Clark. But here comes Linus then, using the toe as they go uphill. He's now alongside in this ex-Gary Brandon car, who was a supporter of the series for a long time, who's spectating this weekend, and he's gone through. So Jack Linus is now up into 5th spot. I guess the question, Johnny, though, is with a lap and a half to go, can he stay there?
I think he can. I think, it's not just ability to overtake here, but he's also got great lap speed. And the early indication is that the 74 car of Linus is going to just extend that gap a little bit. David Martin sticking with him first of all. And this car, Paul Clark, still recovering really from the moment he had at the start of the lap. Ian Hardy's still got his hands full as well. Behind him, he's got Sean Brame in the green and red car. And Tor Tuller in that confusingly liveried number 90, not normally running in the black and white, but Tor Tuller is well in that fight for 8th, 9th and 10th places, currently in the hands of Ian Hardy. And here is the leader, soon to be winner, Josh. 1 lap to go,
so we're going to get the last lap board out, so they get the extra lap in today, which they didn't yesterday, so it's going to be a 9-lap race yesterday. It's wheel-to-wheel through the hairpin. Sean Brame versus Tuller, who lost that place to Ian Hardy a moment ago, and he's hoping to hang on as they head up to the final corner into Siemens to start their 9th lap. And Tuller's dropped behind Sean Brain, but there is the leader then, Craig Land, who we haven't seen much of. He's extended his lead out now to 3 seconds in the Team Sellers racing car, last year's champion, the ex-Super 1 Carter, who's now 30 years of age. He's a product developer from Derbyshire, and he turns his way then up towards the left-hander at Rocket, and then turns right and makes his way up towards Peel. But this is a much better race. This is more what Craig Land had hoped for this season after winning so many races last year. Having not won the first 3, Johnny, he must have been wondering when that first win was going to come.
True, it's been a game of patience, I suppose, for Craig. I notice his very smooth driving style, and even with a bit of push, if you like, or no, that's the wrong expression, oversteer, looking a little bit loose through the left-hander at Siemens, but he just mops it up with a slight bit of corrective steering. But the application into these tricky tight corners, very, very decisive control of the car, and into and out of hairpin. Can stare behind him briefly into the mirrors and see a 3-second gap very nearly back to Todd Boucher, and it's been a convincing drive by Craig Land for his first victory.
Yeah, he came into the race 14 points behind. He's going to pull 4 of those back with his first win of the season. So Craig Land wins round 4 of the Yokohama Locost Championship from Todd Boucher and Tom Parker for the battle for 8th position, and that's going to go right to the line. It's side by side as Todd Tuller now is fighting back. He's got himself ahead of Sean Brame, and he's challenging Ian Hardy up towards the final corner. Meanwhile, across the line in 4th position has come David Hitchin, who was being clawed in by Jack Linus at the end. David Martin was 6th ahead of Paul Clark in the 8th position, a race to the line, which is just headed by Ian Hardy, who narrowly beats Tor Tuller and Sean Brame in that battle. The best of the rest is going to be Barry Stewart, who comes through in 11th position now, just ahead of Alan Harmon. And after that spin and a moment earlier in the race, Glenn Boyer, he's 13th, and he's got a nice battle just behind him, which sees Rob Sisson get the better of Alistair Parker on the last lap, and Mark Rue completes the top 16. So it's a different race to yesterday, because that good start for Craig Land just gave him enough to pull clear of the toe. And I think that would probably was... Yeah, they say you can't win races on the first lap, but sometimes perhaps you can.
I don't know whether Todd Boucher was mindful of where he'd parked the car and whether he was in a slightly questionable position from the steward's point of view. We didn't hear anything during the race anyway, but he just couldn't get the car off the line to the tune that Craig Land managed it. And then Boucher was thrown into a battle with Tom Parker early on. I think that did Craig a massive favour, because that was the point where he was able to leap away. Happy to see the red car of Tom Parker up into 2nd place. Boucher eventually got by, but by that point, Craig had gone, and 3 seconds, well, just less than 3 seconds as Craig eased off on that final lap. But 2.4 in low cost is a very convincing margin indeed.
And let's take a look at the results of round 4 of the Yokohama Low-Cost Championship. As Johnny said there, a victory of 2.4 seconds for last year's champion, Craig Land. Todd Boucher continues his run of great races. 2nd place is the lowest he's finished this year, and he's 2nd again this morning. Tom Parker came home in 3rd, dropped 10 seconds back by the end. David Hitchin was 4th. Jack Linus impressed again to 5th. And David Martin completed the top 6 ahead of Paul Clark. Ian Hardy, who was involved in that great battle with Tor Tuller and Sean Brame, right to the checkered flag. Barry Stewart came home 11th ahead of Alan Harmon, Glenn Boyer and Rob Sisson. Alistair Parker, he came home 15th, just ahead of Mark Rue. Trevor Faunch and Keith Malpas were up next, to long-time low-cost racers. Andy Perkins, Steve Brown and Tony Mole also took the checkered flag, ahead of Nick Tuller, and then Glyn Griffiths, the 1 car who didn't make it to the checkered flag. And we'll see the low-costs again about midday, so they've only got a couple of hours to wait till their 3rd race of the weekend. Andy McEwen, meanwhile, we can say good morning to Andy, because he's downstairs with our top 3.
Well, took him a while, but Craig Land finally gets his first victory of the season in the Yokohama Locost Championship, and he's out of his car now, so we can have a quick chat with race winner Craig Land. That sounds good. It's taken you a little while to get going this season, hasn't it? Not a terrible year, but must be glad to get that first win.
Yeah, definitely. After the first incident at Donington, obviously that just set. We just obviously making the most of 24th and getting back to 6th. But yeah, it's nice. I think in the first race I managed to pull away in the first 2 laps. So I obviously thought about that last night and tried to make the most of that for this race. And obviously the toe in Locost is huge, so trying to break that 2-second barrier was probably the most important part of the race. And I'm just trying to keep that every lap. But yeah, it's definitely, if it's going to continue like this, it should be an exciting season, I think.
Fingers crossed, that's certainly what we want to see. Looking ahead now to the 3rd race later on, good for you really that this is a triple header, because you can hopefully use this win now as a springboard maybe for another later on today.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, looking at the weather, it could be wet as well. So, I mean, wet normally goes towards us a little bit, depending, I don't know, obviously we're not raced hard much in the wet, so that'll make it even more exciting, I guess, for the spectators. But yeah, hopefully, obviously, having one more race today, there's some more points on the table to get, so let's go for it, I think.
Looking forward to it. Congratulations, Craig, on that victory. Now, where's Todd Boucher gone to? He is over here having a chat. What was a solid race for you, really, there, back on the podium again. Happy with that?
Yeah, I was quite happy with it. Yeah, Craig pulled away once he got out in front of us from the start. But, yeah, no, it was good. A lot cooler than yesterday. Car was a bit slippier, but, yeah, no, it was good fun.
Consistency is your thing this year, isn't it? Podium every race so far. What's the chance of getting on that top step later on today?
We'll give it our best shot, see what we can do.
Sounds like a plan. Todd Boucher then in 2nd place, and 3rd place went the way of Tom Parker, who is right behind me. There we go. One question very quickly then, Tom. Happy with that, another 3rd place?
Yeah, it's good to be on the podium again. Very enjoyable race. Just these 2 boys are just a little bit too quick for me, unfortunately. Yeah, great fun.